Gentlemen, we're back with another fantastic homeless romantic podcast. Today I've got somebody very special with me. He's an incredible author, creative mind. I'll read his bio here. Jonathan Ames is the author of several books, including Waking Up, Sir, and most recently, A Man Named Doll. His novels, The Extra Man and You Were Never Really Here, have been adapted into films. And he's currently the creator of 2 television series, Blunt Talk and Bored to Death. He's the winner of the Guggenheim Fellowship and has 2 amateur boxing matches fighting under the Herring Wonder. We have the amazing, incomparable Jonathan Ames.
Well, thank you.
This is where the flashy Hollywood bits come in. We got to make it exciting for the kids.
Or music, you know.
He wrote this book, The Wheel of Doll. It's a wonderful extension of a book before that I read, but this is like a noir kind of detective mystery thriller affair. Am I right?
Yes, it's the second book in what I'm calling my Happy Doll series. The main character, his name is Happy Doll. His parents didn't think it would be a joke to name him that. Last name was Doll. Anyway, he's been saddled with that name, but the first book in the series was A Man Named Doll. And now what you just held up is the second book in the series, The Wheel of Doll.
Okay. So
and I'm working on the third in the series, but I don't have a set title yet.
That was one of my questions. I was going to ask you if there was going to be more, because I really, really enjoyed the pace of this book and the realness of its characters and stuff. It was just a great read all throughout, and it read itself, basically. So anybody who's still literate out there, I totally suggest picking up this book. And even if you're not, I mean, why not? So we have some questions we're going to run through and see how you do. Some pertain to the book, but some are a bit personal. So our protagonist in this book, our main character, he's got a bit of a debaucherous side, but he mentions that he has some kind of Buddhist convictions. Is that something that you resonate with? Do you know about the Buddha, and kind of, does that resonate with you?
Very much so. Where the character's at in the book, he's just begun studying Buddhism, reading some of the literature, and he's just beginning to grasp some of the concepts. And that's why the book is called The Wheel of Doll, because, you know, the Buddha turned the Dharma wheel something like 12 times. And he turned the wheel for each of the 4 noble truths. But there was like 3, like the Buddhists are really into numbers. There's like 37 perfections and 52 generalities. I mean, they're really cool with numbers because it's very much like a technology, which is interesting because they talk about the Buddha turning the wheel. And the wheel, turning the wheel, his main original teaching, the 4 noble truths, which it lead to enlightenment, or at least a lessening of your suffering. So the book is called The Wheel of Doll because this is Doll sort of trying to turn his own truths, but really making a mess of things because he's just at the beginning of his study of Buddhism. I've been doing my own, like on my own, just buying books, reading them. I don't have a teacher. I don't have what they call a sangha, which would be a community, but I've been reading this really great series by the Dalai Lama. I've read different translations of something called the Dhammapada, which is considered to be like some of the original teachings, though, you know, of course, none of this was written down. It was all oral. But yeah, so I just love Buddhist philosophy. And it really connects a lot with, psychoanalytic theory of basic, because the first noble truth is acknowledge that we all suffer, that we are in pain. The second noble truth is analyze your suffering, look at it to see what you are doing to contribute to your suffering. So it's not about being a victim. And then what you begin to realize is that you have behaviors and thinking patterns that are incredibly repetitious and destructive. And this is called samsara. Freud called it repetition compulsion. I write about some of this in the book. And so you begin to recognize the things you do. Now, some of these things are more obvious. Let's say if you're an alcoholic, you're in this repetition of drinking too much, regretting it, drinking too much, regretting it, gambling, anger, sex, food, gossip. There's all these samsaric behaviors. Also, pleasure can be samsaric. You finish an ice cream cone, you're like, oh, I want another one. Or you watch a good TV show, you want to watch more. And so even pleasure will lead to pain because there's no ultimate satisfaction in these things, perhaps things outside yourself. Mm-hmm. The satisfaction comes from, well, I'm going off tangent here, but satisfaction basically comes from being in the moment and trying to help others. And anyway, so the second noble truth is study your suffering. The third noble truth is, having realized some of your patterns, you begin to try to really stop some of those patterns, and you glimpse liberation, or you glimpse this famous rock band known as Nirvana. And Nirvana is when you have a cessation or a stopping of your destructive repetition patterns, and suddenly the world, you might notice the beauty around you a bit more, because you're not caught up in this wheel of, negative wheel of thinking. And so then the fourth noble truth is, walk that path as much as you can. And if you really walk it and work on the four noble truths, and then there's the eightfold noble path, which is right thinking, right view, right work. And when they say right, meaning that everything is geared towards lessening your own suffering, and by lessening your own suffering, you can lessen the suffering of others. And this is how you can become enlightened. Now, I don't think I'll perhaps ever become enlightened, but I can glimpse enlightenment, or I can glimpse moments where I'm not suffering so much. And again, so much suffering has to do, Buddhist philosophy, with self-centeredness, attachment to things, attachment to the notion of oneself, attachment to how you think other people should be or how the world should be. So once someone said, long before I started studying any of this stuff, they quoted something to me. They said, anything you hold on to will cause you pain. And at the time, I was really holding on to the dream of being a writer. And this was like in the early 90s. And my second novel had gotten rejected by like 25 publishers. And I thought, oh no, I'm not going to make it as a writer. I'd published one book, had a bad case of second novelitis. Took me 7 or 8 years to try to publish another one. I was still rather young. I was in my early 30s. And so I'm like, oh, I'm holding on to this dream of being a writer, which all had to do perhaps with ego and identity. And I realized I had to let go of that dream. And then I realized I still did love writing, but I had to let go of this dream of what I thought my life should be. And when I did, suddenly it turned out one publisher who had my book on their desk for 6 months hadn't actually rejected it, just hadn't read it yet. So one publisher out of the 25 in New York decided to publish it. And that became my second book, and maybe my best book, The Extra Man, or at least the best of that version of myself at that time. Anyway, so all this to say that I really am very enamored with Buddhist philosophy and find it deeply helpful. And just, and I've read a lot of the very popular Buddhist writers in America, like Thich Nhat Hanh, the beautiful Vietnamese monk who recently passed, who very much considered, one of the people that really brought in the concept of mindfulness into, present day vernacular. The writer Pema Chodron is fantastic, wonderful American Buddhist nun. The Dalai Lama, this guy Eknath Esawaran, and then reading translations, and then also some of the reading some Hindu literature, reading the I Ching, other Eastern philosophies, all very, the Tao of the now, and they all say, come back to the now. When you're in the now, most likely you're less frightened. And if you're less frightened, you're more capable to be there for another human being or another sentient being. Anyway, enough on that.
Fantastic.
Buddhism is a big part of the book, and it's something that's really helped me. And if anyone out there hears this, I highly recommend reading some Buddhist literature.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it works with any religion you may or may not be. It's really more of a philosophy.
Yeah.
And it gives you a way to lessen your own suffering.
Yeah. It's a bit of a sociology, and every philosopher that's existed from the Greek days through the 1980s do agree that to live is to suffer. And the Buddha put it most eloquently that if it's like material goods or just the wanting of anything, expectation always kind of is the parent of disappointment at some point.
Yeah, but also, though, we can take our suffering. Our suffering is our goal. It can become your wisdom, your compassion, your empathy. And so, so the Buddha said, I'm not an expert, but he said something like, I teach only suffering and the transformation of suffering. And so it's all about this alchemy, to take that which has been our greatest weaknesses or troubles and to learn from them. And again, perhaps with the hope perhaps of being able to help someone else who maybe is suffering in a similar way.
Yeah. And that's the essence of this podcast, is to get these kind of messages out there through the stories and the people that I know. That suffering is wisdom to some degree, can be.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we'll move on. Question 2. The main character, who I really love, is this detective named Dahl. He has a really lovable companion, his dog, George. Do you have a dog, and what's your opinion about dogs?
Yeah. Well, the word, again, sort of staying on this philosophical realm. The word dog backwards is God. So it's like I actually speak backwards a lot. And like your name Chris backwards is Cirque. Jeffries is C Earthfedge. Laptop is Pop Pal. Banjo is Ojnab. Computers Retup Mock. Wall the Law. Hoodie Ei Doof. Headphones Inafta Da F. So dog, God. But no, I have always loved dogs. I have a dog. I thought I had a rock with his picture on it, but where is it? No. Anyway, he's asleep in the other room, and I have a painting of him, but none of them are present. I have a picture of my old dog up there. I could show that. But anyway, yeah, I'm deeply, attached to my dog. So, but that could be dangerous because, but that's part of our suffering, is that everything comes to an end.
Yeah.
But also lives on in ways. But so, I love dogs, and the character has a dog very much based on my dog. And one of the qualities of my dog is his very beautiful eyes, very large, brown, expressive eyes.
I want pictures.
Yeah. I'll get your email after this, and I'll send you some. So anyway, I love my dog. I love dogs. I also like cats. I once owned a cat. I had a very good friendship with a cat. And and I like all sorts of animals. I mean, there's skunks in my neighborhood. I don't dislike them. I saw one walking across the street last night, very slow, but a skunk sprayed my dog and myself one time, and it's quite hellish.
Yeah.
They really have no defenses. They move slow. They're tiny. I don't think they have good sight or hearing. I mean, we're about 10 yards away. That the skunk didn't even notice. So I think that's like, you have to be right on top of them. Then they're like, ah! They lift up their tail and they squirt you. Yeah. And you fucking, excuse my language, you stink for months. Anyway, but I like all animals. Little ground squirrels around my house that I feel like are my buddies. I mean, they don't see me that way. I also like all my trees and all the flowers. That seems like a nice tree behind you.
Oh, yeah. This is a nice, what do they call it? Ficus. Yeah, Ficus indoris. No, I mean, when was the first time in life, this is like a branch off question, when did you first realize that you liked animals and nature and stuff like that? And you said, well, these guys are interesting.
I don't know if I had a revelation. It's just, I had dogs as a kid. I always liked being in the woods. I grew up on a little pond. The pond was a source of fascination. Ice in the winter, of course. Eventually, I began to see right in my own backyard. This was in the late 70s, early 80s. By the mid 80s, the pond wasn't freezing anymore. But, I would spend, my childhood in the late 60s, 70s, ice skating from like December to March every year. It's just ice, my own little Hans Christian Andersen life. And, but so the life of the pond, the algae, the fish swimming in it, the trees, the leaves changing, the beautiful reflections in the pond of the leaves. And then, my dogs. But I wasn't necessarily like some nature fanatic kid.
Sure.
I didn't camp.
Sure.
I loved running around my woods and having adventures.
Where is this, New Jersey?
Yeah, New Jersey.
Yeah.
North of New York City. So it was, and actually when my parents moved there in 1960, it was like a dirt road to our house. And of course later paved, but it wasn't a cookie cutter suburb. It was kind of like an older town.
I was really shocked when I came through New Jersey finally on my little journeys and stuff that New Jersey's actually got still some very beautiful, very wild parts.
Yeah, well, you got the whole, that forest, I forget what it's called, but it's actually one of like the longest contiguous forests. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, I forget.
No. I called this junior, senior, the Pine Barrens. Thank you. My brain is just totally destroyed. I call these moments junior, senior moments because I'm not quite a senior yet, but I'm approaching it. But yeah, the Pine Barrens are one of the longest contiguous, like probably old growth forests. Like the trees aren't necessarily big because it's like somewhat coastal, but the Pine Barrens. Then there's like a part of New Jersey, actually I think where somebody has a golf club that looks like Vermont. Rolling hills. It's kind of horse country.
Yeah.
And then you have the Jersey Shore, which is quite wonderful. Anyway, it was called the Garden State. There was a lot of farmland.
Yeah, I could compare it to some parts of upstate New York, and this just like all of a sudden there'll be these rolling hills with grass and cows and stuff, and then everything I learned from George Carlin about New Jersey was not true. But yeah, I was really surprised. But I also went to the parking lots of New Jersey and had intercourse inside my van that I lived in. Sorry.
That steam coming off the top of my head on that.
Good times. Yeah. I go back there one day, but and then when I would get into a fender bender in New York, and I'd accidentally take somebody's side view mirror off, I would panic as a foreigner and drive to New Jersey immediately, cross the George Washington Bridge, and just get out of town. So I swear to God, somebody was following me to report that I had taken somebody's mirror off. It's like I can't afford to be in this mess right now. Which leads me to my next question. Our hero in this novel is also not afraid to take any drug that may benefit his task at hand. Have you ever experimented with drugs in your youth? And if so, which one was the most memorable?
Well, first of all, in the book, the character, he smokes some pot. He doesn't really like to drink too much, but he ends up with a thing of cocaine, and it's more that he needs to stay up. Also, he's in a lot of pain, and he has this romantic notion from the novel Papillon, which became the film with Steve McQueen. I think they did it again, where this prisoner, Papillon, would escape from prison. He was in a French penal colony, I think in the late 20s, 30s, and he got to an island off of South America, was able to escape from the island, get into South America, but he'd be chased through the jungles or had to keep moving. And he and this guy who helped people escape from prison would chew coca leaves as a way to give them energy and keep going. And, and obviously, I guess Coca-Cola at one time had cocaine in it. But I think cocaine is personally a terrible drug. It really makes people behave very badly. Terrible for your brain.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, so he does a lot of drugs in this novel only because he's like in all this pain and he's got to pursue these people. So he's not necessarily like a recreational, like, hey, let's have a good time. And except for some marijuana. As for my own use, I've tried things and, I think people should stay away from them. They don't need it.
Yeah. Good advice. Good advice.
Yeah, don't do it. But because really it goes back to that Buddhist thing. You're chasing something. You're wanting to cover over your suffering. And all you really end up doing is making your suffering worse. Now, of course, you're going to have some ecstatic moments and some moments of connection. But usually these things take more than they give.
Yeah, that is true.
And so it's really like playing with fire, and they're very depleting. Like I've not ever been part of this whole ecstasy scene or world or something like that. I know people literally probably have ecstatic moments, but I just wonder how depleted they might be afterwards. And is that low afterwards worth the high? Maybe for some people it is, and that could be great, but you have to be careful because you do too much of that, you're messing with all the natural Mother Nature joy that might be in you. It's like putting an amplifier up too loud. Maybe you're going to blow the speakers. But moderation in all things.
Yeah. I mean, you're saying it's better to embrace the suffering of life just head on, and then at the end, the wisdom you get from that is more orgasmic than any kind of drug. I kind of agree with that, but I've also taken a lot of drugs, so it's hard to say because I've had fun. But we don't condone this.
I wouldn't say orgasmic, but more peaceful. You know what I mean? It's like trying to find balance. Now, some people love being out of balance. It's everyone's different. And I guess that's my main thing would be people have to be careful not to destroy themselves. Like I've had friends really destroy themselves on drugs and still chasing that escape and in the book, there's a character who chases heroin so long that until they're practically erased. And so, it's, so.
There's a dark side to it. I've had friends go down the path of stuff like heroin and alcohol and drink themselves to death at 28, and others who have hung themselves because of the chemical imbalance that they have to deal with when ultimately addiction takes over every chance you have at having a normal life and being happy in a natural kind of way. And it's really not like experimentation is one thing. Take some acid, go to the concert, have fun, stuff like that. But addiction is a very, very serious thing that makes people like ghosts or zombies or some kind of other creature. That's it's horrible. It's horrible.
We've lost so many incredible people, artists and non-artists, and but I'm thinking of you in Germany, and I suddenly flashed in my mind to a pub, or not a pub, or whatever you call. What do you call a bar in Germany?
Brauhaus.
And Brauhaus, and just the ritual of alcohol or sharing a glass of wine with someone. These all can be beautiful ways to connect.
Yeah. In moderation. Yeah. Well, let's change it up. You done some boxing in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Under the name The Herring Wonder. Where did that name come from, and why did you want to get started boxing?
Yeah. Well, in 1999, I was living in the East Village in New York. I was doing a lot of performance art, this and that, and I had a fascination always with boxing, the romance of boxing, getting in the ring, being a hero. And somehow it came up that this other performance artist who had jumped off of buildings, and he was kind of like, he was like the East Village Evel Knievel. MTV at the time called him the Impact Addict. He had jumped off of like this converted school, which was now a theater. There's like 6 stories. He jumped off it into this huge thing, dressed as Maria von Trapp. I mean, he was a real nut. He's still alive. He's a friend of mine. Anyway, long story short, he challenged me to a boxing match in 1999. He did it over the phone, had me recorded by a friend. It became this whole thing. I didn't know why the friend was coming over with the camera. You know, this was all pre-internet and cell phones. I have a landline. And this guy's videotaping me. And I thought this friend wanted to record me laughing at a dirty joke or something, because he said, I'm going to call you. This guy Richard's going to come over and film you taking my phone call. I'm like, okay, what the heck? So anyway, it was this challenge to a boxing match. And in part, it was like, I don't know. Anyway, so he, right in that moment, I said, and he was bigger than me. He had actually had some real boxing matches. He had fought this guy who went on to become the heavyweight champ, Riddick Bowe, on a crossing of the Staten Island Ferry in New York. And so I said, all right, I'll fight you. And you know what? I'm going to call myself the Herring Wonder. I lived 2 blocks from this great herring store at the time called Russ and Daughters. I'm Jewish. I loved herring. I had this idea that herring would give me strength and give me like herring breath in the ring, and that herring is such a beautiful fish surviving in the cold waters. And I'm like, I'll call myself the Herring Wonder, which I knew would be an absurdist name. Anyway, it stuck all these years. I fought him in 99, took a terrible beating, and it was a huge performance art event. We did it in this 19th century converted synagogue. The artist Matthew Barney was one of the judges. I think he had done some boxing. There was this crazy undercard. We had like 500 people in the audience. It was all a little bit illegal, kind of like pre-Fight Club, Fight Club. And yeah, and I broke my nose like 2 weeks before the fight. There's no way I should have fought with a shattered nose. A shard could have gone into my brain.
Oh, really?
And,
oh, fuck.
And I had this headgear on, but it still wasn't protected. And the guy said, I won't go for your nose, but we got to go through the fight. We only have this place for one night. All the down payments, you know, he was like producing the whole thing, you know, would make his money back from the ticket sales. And of course he went for my head. He said he wouldn't go for my head, which would have made it a lousy fight anyway. Yeah. But he re-broke my nose in the second round. It was only supposed to be 2-minute rounds. They were 3-minute rounds. So I took like a 12-minute public beating. Like the timekeeper was punch drunk from like this gym in Gleason's in Brooklyn called Gleason's. Anyway, it was devastating. I looked like, you know, Robert De Niro in Raging Bull. Afterwards, I had this unibrow, broken nose, black eyes. You know, anyway, my memory, I don't know, has ever been the same, to be honest. Like I used to have a great facial memory. Now I can't I've never been able to retain faces in the same way. So I may have, you know, who knows what, you know, all this stuff about concussions has come out, and I definitely got concussed that night. Yeah. And anyway, but then 8 years later, some Canadian writer challenged me to a fight because he was coming out with a book called The Fighter, and the American edition was coming out. And I actually got the challenge from a publishing house, Doubleday. I'm like, what? I'm being challenged by a publishing house? I've got to come out of retirement. And it was to be like on the pier on the Hudson River, you know. But then, and I'm like, oh, wow, that's a romantic spot to fight, because it was all about the romance. And that was a big thing I learned in the first fight. Oh, I don't like to hit people. You know, I didn't know. I was like maybe a little bit Buddhist oriented then. I'm like, oh, I don't like to hit people. Wait, oh my God, like I like just walking through the ropes, and I got in really great shape. And then it was like, oh no, I'm not cut out for this. Like my trainer in the first fight, he was in the corner, goes, Jonathan, get angry, get angry. I'm like, oh, I go straight to depression. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to take my rage out on another human being. Anyway, I accepted this second fight, but then it turned out I got disqualified from being part of this night of fights because I was too old. I was like, let's see, in 77, it wasn't that I was too old, but I was like 13 years older than my opponent, and you couldn't have more than a 10-year age gap. And anyway, so at 43, I fought this guy who was like 31. We ended up doing it at Gleason's gym. A huge crowd turned out. And the guy who beat me to a pulp 8 years earlier was part of my team. We called it Team Herring. And and people waved at both my fights, silver herrings. At the second fight, Russ and Daughters actually, catered the fight. So people were eating herring snacks before the fight. And that fight, which was a proper semi-legal amateur fight because it was in this gym, it kind of fell under white collar boxing or whatever they call it. It was 3 rounds, 2 minutes, like a 6-minute fight, as opposed to the 12-minute demolition I took with a guy. The first fight, he was about 30 pounds heavier than me. And that makes a huge difference, like physics-wise. Someone who's a lot heavier than you hits you, and when you hit them, it just doesn't hurt as much unless, like, you're Bruce Lee and, like, you have, like lightning in your punches.
Yeah.
And anyway, and the guy I fought the second time was quite a bit larger than me, but he was a bit awkward. And I basically, in a gentlemanly way, outboxed him. And I did hit him a few times. I saw him grimace. I felt bad. I think I almost said sorry, And mostly we held on to each other. And I remember, like, the guy who was acting as the ref, he was like, break. And I had learned from my first fight, like, every second you're not getting hit, you're not dying. Also, my jaw was out of line in that second fight. I had taken a shot to the jaw training, and I was really worried that the jaw would shoot up into the brain, because I found out that's why you get knocked out when you get hit here, because there's actually a tip of the brain by the corner of your jaw somehow. And I saw that on a diagram for a mouthpiece, because I thought maybe my mouthpiece was weird, because my jaw, like a typewriter, was out of line leading up to this fight, which was making me very, but again, I had to go through it's insane.
Yeah.
On the box again. Anyway, so yeah, I had these 2 crazy fights. It was a great moment, though, that fight in 2007. It was very romantic, and my girlfriend at the time was there. There's a lot of romance to the ring. And so, yeah, that's how I came to be the Herring Wonder.
There you go. Fighting is an intimate thing, and it's good to, like, go through that as a human being. Like, we shouldn't be warring people, but to go out there and throw dukes with people. I mean, it's a matter of time. I was forced into that world myself. I'm more sensitive. I'm an artist, but I was certainly schooled in the ways of the fist fight at an early age. Yeah.
Is that some of your artwork behind you?
Yeah. I don't know if you can see, there's some cartoons and stuff, but I like
them.
I do all kinds of weird art. I've got an album I made called Homeless Romantic. It's all these songs I wrote about being homeless, and it's got, an old-timey vibe with the violins and the banjos and such, and it's okay. It's okay. It's nothing to write home about, but
nothing to write homeless about. You mean? Sorry.
Touche.
Is Ojnab.
You're the backwards man. It's your nickname now. All right, so
backwards man is Nam Sadraka.
Yeah, I'd see a doctor about that. That's an interesting condition you have. I like that.
A Rotkod? That's doctor.
How about race car?
A race car, Racky car. Or I guess...
Could be. You have to jam it together, yeah. We're going to have to do this again. Off the script and just wild and improv. So this next question is going to be great because it's going to bring up all kinds of stuff. As the world seems to be becoming increasingly unhinged, how do you stay calm, enjoy your life, and invade all the madness?
Invade or evade?
Evade. Avoid.
Well, it's not easy. Our cell phones, the internet, we're inundated with all this horror all the time. We should get our horror in smaller doses. But I have a hard time. That's why I think I've gotten into Buddhism and stuff. But it requires discipline. Our main thing is our thinking. Our thinking is the greatest cause of our suffering. And so let's say I'm really looping on something, whether paranoia or hurt feelings or resentment or fear, and I can't get out of it. And then there's various Buddhist methods, literally try to take 3 conscious breaths. And then there's something called Tonglen, which is, let's say I'm obsessing about someone, I'm upset about someone, and I'm looping. Maybe there's someone I'd like to tell off, or I'm hurt by them, and I'm just looping. And so then there's this thing of like, okay, try to stop the looping and just breathe in the sensation of the pain. Just hold it. Like, okay, just hold that pain or the feeling that and then on the exhale, send yourself love. Send yourself love for the fact that you're just going crazy, suffering with this crap, going on and on and on. You can't turn it off. Then you inhale that pain again. On the exhale, you send yourself love. And you also, on the exhale, send out love to all the other people that might be looping with resentment towards a family member, let's say, whatever the thing is that you're going crazy about. Or it could be a financial fear. And so you send out love to all the other people out there, who millions across the planet, are having the exact same fear and pain that you're having. And so then you send that out. And if you do that, and then the third thing, let's say there's someone who upsets you, that's always sort of pushing your buttons, then you breathe in their pain. Because every person, let's say, even if they're annoying or weird, they've got pain, they've got issues. And partly they might be acting out against you because of their pain. So suddenly you see how vulnerable they are, and you breathe in their pain, and you feel compassion for them, and you send them love. And so through this process of Tonglen, I can sometimes bring myself peace, even for a moment. And for me, I've noticed, like, I can be sitting out front of my house, and there's this beautiful bougainvillea bush with the most, like, radiant neon purple leaves. And if I'm caught in my head, in my thinking, my eyes might be seeing, but I don't see. But if I can quiet the noise through this process of Tonglen, or just trying to do 3 breaths where I'm aware, breathing in and breathing out, where you actually feel the breath, you actually touch your motor, your engine, your physical thing, and you stop all this thinking. What a Buddhist concept is empty. All our thinking is empty. There's nothing there. It's like, oh, wait, what is all that thinking, all that pain? Where is it? It's like, and so you drop that, come back to your breath, you can have some peace. Now, something that really brings me peace in the physical world, separate from just trying to work with my thinking, is the ocean. If I go in the ocean, it's like everything. It's like exercise, it's nature, it's beauty. I love it. And that brings me a lot of peace, or momentary peace. My dog brings me peace. Friends, kindness, and I love reading, and I enjoy. I've become more of a TV watcher during COVID, but so I also enjoy the peace that comes from reading, and these things bring me pleasure. But the main thing is to work with our thinking. Our thinking is the biggest source of our suffering. And even with the outside world, like, okay, we know what's going on with the outside world, but it's the obsessing about it that's the most suffering. And then, I guess, do what you can. But, we're all caught in this very, capitalistic, resource society culture. It's hard not to be complicit. Between the plastics and the oil and electricity, like whatever, all this technology that burst upon the planet starting towards the end of the 19th century is a little bit like drugs. When I said they tend to take more than they give.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but the ocean, awareness of breath, this practice of this Buddhist thing, Tonglen, Tonglen, if people look it up. These are some of the things that help me.
Because the threats are real, And so we have to absolutely find a way to find peace. And there's no better way than getting down to the subtleties of what we have left, including the flowers and your dog, who is a incredible thing to be around. There's still things around to meditate on.
There's so much beauty out there. And in a weird way, let's enjoy it while it's still there, Now, of course, some people are better at being more active. And, years ago, this was in 2003, I was embedded, as they say, on a Greenpeace boat in Alaska for 2 weeks. And they were the most beautiful young people from all around the world on this boat, going up the intracoastal there along this forest, much of which has been destroyed and clear cut. But still tremendous beauty up there. And I interviewed everybody on that boat for 2 weeks. I never ended up writing the piece because it was just it was such a beautiful experience though. And all these young people, they were doing this, spending years of their lives trying to call attention, trying to stop certain polluters, doing what they could. They all felt that they weren't going to win. But that the planet itself would endure. But as you and I were talking before we got recorded, that a lot of species, the Earth itself, maybe we make the air so toxic that even, the oceans are acidified or something. But I still think once humans are removed, the world could heal itself. It might take a couple of million years or something. I don't know. Look, I'm not a scientist, but it's very obviously depressing and upsetting and something we live with all the time. Like I think there was a line in A Man Named Doll where he said, the modern human being, we have to hold two ideas in our mind at the same time. The physical world is beautiful.
Yeah.
One, the physical world is beautiful, and two, we are destroying it.
Yep.
And this is a difficult thing to live with. Now, there are people like that wonderful young woman, Greta Thunberg. They're trying. I don't do much myself. Mm-hmm. I recycle. You said you're a vegetarian. That's a very important thing to do. The slaughter of animals and the meat, and obviously they plow so much of the Amazon just to grow McDonald's. It's just a nightmare, So, but I've not been able to maintain a vegan or vegetarian diet myself. I tend to wither away.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it properly, perhaps. But anyway,
we're not driving the bus on this one. Like, we're not the ones really that are in control to make the serious changes that need to happen in order to save us from absolute Armageddon and go down the road of biodiversity. That's out of our control. You do okay as a writer. I'm certainly a hobo. We still don't have the ability to take the wheel. It's on a select few group of people, and they're not going to do it. So.
But even those select few, those are individuals. It's, certainly world leaders could really make it, like if you had to truly, deeply profound, inspiring, but these corporations, which are so big, like they're just, it's like science fiction. They're answering to this like greater thing of the bottom line, and, the oil companies, I don't know, like if they had shifted 30, 40 years ago they could have dominated the markets. And I don't know, I was reading something about hydrogen fuel cells and like all these things. You could just have, all these Impossible burgers, but you could still have a lot of the grease runoff. There's ways you could run cars like on just oil, vegetable oil. Yeah. Fossil fuels are all the vegetation that died 8 billion years ago turned into this goo, plus the animals.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, whatever. Look,
We're going down. It's a slippery slope.
Whoever watches your podcast or hears this is like, who is this idiot?
Who are these two rambling old grouchy fucks?
Who are these two idiots who don't know anything about science, but who are very sad about what's happening? And yet,
that's it.
I drive a car. I mean, when I was in my 20s, I woke up to all this. It was 1987, and I was big into sports. And I think was starting to learn about I was a vegan, and there was like this Sports Illustrated issue came out, and it said "Our World in Peril." This was 1987, because the NASA report had come out about like what they could see from above, what was happening. And I got really upset for years. Like I didn't want to go in cars. I saw each car as a little fire. So I rode my bike everywhere. I'd see someone eating a hamburger. I wanted to scream, like, no, we can't, these cows, we can't be slaughtering them. And like, I was all very upset. And then like, I don't know. Yeah, I think it was like I had like 5 years of just being very upset, driving me crazy to see people eating meat. But then sometimes I'd be so broke and that people would have me to their homes. So I'd have to say yes, because like if you're broke and can't feed yourself, you're not going to say no if someone's like offering you, there, you got to eat it, and certainly not say anything. So I was very upset for like 5 years, in a state of just very upset, 87 to 92. And then I was in a bus in New York City, a bus belching, smoke, and I glanced over like to a diner, and I saw a woman smoking a cigarette, and she had a hamburger in one hand, and I was just like, just let it go. Just let it all go. Yeah. It's like I can't change this.
Yeah.
And, I used to say back in the day, we needed like environmentally like a Ray Kroc. Like that guy got all these people to eat these crummy burgers. Like if there was a way to somehow get everyone, I don't know, but we're, cars, and anyway, we
ended up with all this addictive stuff that as what we are was chimpanzees, basically. We had no plan after we subjected ourselves to all these factory produced addictive substances. Give me drugs, give me cheeseburgers, and shovel them into my mouth off a fucking conveyor belt. We never were prepared for what that does to our brain. And so now we're walking around fat, delusional, insane, violent, it's just, and that's especially in the West, It's going to be the fall of Rome here soon, I think, my friend.
Well, it's, Rome wasn't built in a day. Rome didn't fall in a day. So we're in the days when Rome was falling. And so, but, maybe it won't.
Yeah, I hope.
I hope. I know, but here we are. You're in your comfortable spot in Germany. I'm in my comfortable home. We're okay right now. I mean, I'm a part of the middle class. I was born into the lower middle class. Now I'm like middle to upper class. But but as a writer, you have long dry periods where you have no income, and like I go years where I have no income, and then I have some income, but then I don't really make an income from books. And, I get paid to write a script once in a while, and that keeps me afloat. Yeah. But we do I have it good. And so anyway.
Yeah. I can tell you, if it wasn't for this neck pain I got, I think things would be going a lot better. But
oh, you have neck pain?
Well, yeah, I pinched a nerve. I did something back there, and now I'm walking around.
I'll tell you what you did. You're angry about something, and I know what you're angry about because we spoke pre-recording, which we won't go in there. But seriously, no. Most neck and back pain is repressed anger, and it's something that it's our body's way of telling us there's something we're upset about that we're not fully dealing with. And you should read this book called Healing Back Pain. I had massive back pain all my life. I started when I was 8 years old, and they put me in a corset, and And I read this book in 2011 called Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno. And like 95 to 99% of all neck and back pain is psychosomatic. Now, your pain is real. There's something you're upset about, and so you're cutting off the flow of oxygen to the muscles in your neck. And because we sort of learn this behavior, and literally you have something, you call someone a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
You've got something going on that is a pain in the neck. So you create a pain in the neck in some ways to distract yourself from the thing you're upset about. And I also see it as the body's way of saying to our mind to work with our thinking, there's something you're upset about and you've got to acknowledge it. Sometimes it's helpful and you can then speak to your own brain in a biofeedback way and say, there's something I'm upset about. I don't know what it is, but please stop hurting my neck.
Yeah.
And you'll notice just even saying this, that your neck over the next few hours might start to feel better, because I think it's very much connected. Again, audience, Chris was sharing something personal that we won't get into here that might be upsetting him. And I think that's why your neck is hurting.
Yeah.
And because usually, your neck, the spine, the human spine is like amazing. It's been around for a couple million years. And it's really only like, as people have gotten more anxious in the 20th and 21st centuries, that all this neck and back pain is going on. And so it's a very simple thing. You're cutting off some oxygen and it's creating spasms in the muscle around the neck and the shoulder. And a lot of times people who have a lot of psychosomatic things, they'll even get back surgeries and then they start having neck pain. It just moves around because we want to distract ourselves from the first noble truth, which is life. We are suffering. So acknowledge that you're in pain about this thing and it'll help. But find Sarno, Healing Back Pain, the mind-body connection.
Okay.
And whenever someone tells me, oh, I have back pain or neck pain, first thing I say to them, is there something you're upset about? And they go, no. And they go, yeah. And actually, I was doing jujitsu for a little while, and what's at the dojo, the sensei, I kept talking about this stuff, and he realized that, and he didn't have it, but he had a lot of clients, very driven people who would do one-on-one exercise sessions that had a lot of neck and back pain. And I began talking to him about this, and it really struck a chord with him. So he had me speak to one of his women who that he works with, who was having a lot of back pain. And he said, John, could you talk to her? So we're at the dojo, and this was someone he just trained. They didn't do jujitsu. I was like studying jujitsu with him. And she goes, yeah, I got a lot of back pain. And I said, well, I had this insight. Actually, I think it was 2010, and I was on Facebook at the time. I'm not now. And I had taken a pain pill. I was in so much pain, I could barely move. And I drank some alcohol. I was in so much pain. And I went on Facebook, and I wrote on Facebook, there's something in my back that wants to get out. And two different curmudgeons, perfectionistic curmudgeons. Oftentimes people who are perfectionists or are hard on themselves develop neck and back pain. Two of them wrote, read Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno. Okay. And there's also a wonderful documentary about him called All the Rage. And I'm actually in the documentary. And this guy helped Howard Stern. Howard Stern had like back pain. It helped Larry David, who had neck and shoulder pain. Anyway, it's a really
is this in the line with chiropractic? Is this kind of a chiropractic? No.
It's all in your mind.
Oh shit. Okay.
And it's all about dealing with your emotions. And if you deal with your emotions, your back and neck pain will go away. 99%. And it was the guy who wrote it was an orthopedist, and he realized over 30 years of being an orthopedist at NYU that there was nothing wrong with like 99% of his patients.
Crazy. And
he realized that it was mostly repressed anger. And I actually got to meet him in this documentary, and I said, well, I don't really get angry. Like I said earlier in this podcast, I get sad. And he goes, well, maybe you're angry that you're sad. And also, we also don't necessarily learn how to express our anger. And then in the culture, we're not necessarily taught that life is painful. Like in other cultures, you have initiation rituals. And this is what makes people become adults. And so anyway, I said to this woman, my insight was, I wrote, there's something in my back that wants to get out. And these two people recommended this book. And I said, is there something that you're upset about? And she goes, oh my God, And I told her this thing about something, and she goes, my mother is in my back. Her mother was visiting her. Her mother pushes her buttons, and her back went out. And she realized that her mother was in her back. And as soon as she said that, she started feeling better. She didn't have to go to a chiropractor. She didn't have to go to a doctor. She didn't have to take pain pills. You see this guy Sarno in this documentary called All the Rage. He died actually when the documentary came out 2 or 3 years ago. On the day it came out, he died. He was in his 80s. But he testified before Congress because, the opioid crisis was beginning. People are in a lot of pain. And he is talking about the fact that our emotional lives are what causes so much of this physical pain.
Holy shit. Shit.
So anyway, read this book, and you maybe could have the documentarian of All the Rage, who's a friend of mine named Michael Galinsky, on your podcast.
Yeah, dude, I would love that. I'm looking for any connection between how we are as Americans and the decline of Western civilization. What's the deal there? And like sugar, I got my finger on the idea of sugar being a big thing, but the opioid crisis is still like a mystery to me.
Yeah, so healing back pain, the mind-body connection.
There you go. Okay. I don't have to write it down because I'm recording.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's incredible. Dude, we could talk forever. Jesus Christ. All right. Well, so we'll keep going. We have to do this again. I tell you that.
I'm not to be rude. I thought that was the last question, that one, or is there one more?
Let's see. I'll give you one more question. Okay. How about that? Does that sound okay?
Yeah. I just know we've been going about an hour, so I know we chit-chatted for like a half hour in the beginning.
Well,
and I don't know how long your podcast should be. I don't mean.
I tend to just try to exhaust my guests until they're wiping off their sweat and they like want to go to bed. Mm-hmm. So no, it's up to you. Originally we said 25 minutes. We're well over that. So all right. So I'll ask you questions. You answer them fast, and then we'll try to get out.
And I can end with this sound, like I said.
Oh yeah, we're excited about this. The book is fantastic. It's a great mystery, neo-noir, detective. All kinds of great stuff happens. Can we expect anything in the series coming next, or anything else?
I'm working on a third. I'm hoping to continue these doll books. I personally always love when I hit a writer's vein of books. Especially, I mostly read detective novels. Like Ross MacDonald has 18 books featuring this private detective named Archer. Obviously, Raymond Chandler, had about 7 books with Philip Marlowe between short stories and the novels. Dashiell Hammett had a ton, with his detective named the Continental Op. There's so many current writers, of course, who have detective series. I was also fascinated by this crime series by Richard Stark, which was a pseudonym for Donald Westlake, the writer Donald Westlake. And Richard Stark wrote these 24 crime novels about this character named Parker. I absolutely love those. Oh, and then Lee Child currently with the Reacher series. I like these series. And so I have set out to write a series myself, because I used to tell my writing students, like it was my twist on the Hemingway supposed maxim, write what you know. I would tell my students, write what you love. So write the kind of stories that you enjoy reading, and about something maybe that you're in love with, because then you're fascinated by it and you'll want to convey that. So yeah, I love these kind of series, and I hope to continue if I'm lucky enough. And that's my goal. I enjoy it.
Yeah, and everybody out there, go get a copy of this book when it comes out, and get a copy of the book that came before it, because it's incredibly fun, and one of the last great writers, I think, out there today.
No, I doubt that, and just so people know, I write them to be page turners, because I love reading page turners. I love that compulsive feeling when I'm reading a book, and so I try to.
It's fast moving. It's you got a lot of short chapters, makes you feel like you're going ahead. For a guy like me, I ain't too bright. Got the things wrong with the brain. It's just it was great. I like your style. I've read so many books this year. This was one of my favorites. You've spent some time in some prestigious universities, as well as some seedy bars and some kind of Skid Row kind of stuff. Which do you prefer?
I don't know if I have a preference. I mean, I flashed suddenly. I was really lucky. I went to Princeton University. I got in there mostly because I was a good high school fencer, though I had pretty good grades, and I was the editor of my school paper. But that was like a really romantic place to be, like beautiful architecture, and there was a certain romance to that, and these old lecture halls, and professors, and so I loved that world. I was a very charmed place to be. Now, it was somewhat wasted on me as an 18-year-old, but my senior year in college, I kind of got my act together, and I actually started reading a lot of the books and wrote the beginning of my first novel there.
Wow.
Which was my senior thesis. So I got a lot out of being in a beautiful spot like that. And then later I went to Columbia for graduate school. Again, I just loved being around those old buildings, and I was really into wearing like tweed jackets myself. and so, in beautiful old libraries, I wrote my first novel sitting in a library. I used to write by hand and then type it or give it to a typist. This was I was right on the edge of computers. I was a late adapter. But then also as I was telling you earlier before we recorded, in the mid 80s, I lived on the Bowery in New York, and I used to love being around the bums, and I loved, strange bars in my New York years. It kind of reminded me, like, I loved the Berlin stories by Christopher Isherwood, like 30s Berlin, maybe before Hitler came to power. There was a whole decadence that really, in my 30s and 20s, I used to love being in these places. It all felt so dramatic and strange, and so I've gotten a lot out of both worlds. Now I'm in neither world. I don't go to seedy places anymore, and I'm not at any universities. But now I enjoy the ocean. I live in an interesting neighborhood in Los Angeles with lots of old houses. I like to walk my dog and look at this kind of older Spanish architecture. And it's not that old because it's Los Angeles. We're talking about like 100 years old.
Yeah.
And so no preference, pleasures in both environments.
I understand that fully. In my old age, I prefer walking my dog in just a quiet, peaceful, serene setting.
Yeah.
All right, one more question. Working in the creative field, inspiration is a must. Who are some of your favorite writers and books?
Yeah, well, I sort of mentioned some of them right there, which was, in terms of this genre, I'm really a fan of, the early masters of it, which was Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett. I recently read some James M. Cain. Other writers, again, I mentioned Pema Chodron. I love her books on Buddhism. They've been life-changing for me. She's very popular. And then this Richard Stark, these crime novels.
You also mentioned Kerouac before we started recording.
Yeah, well, I read him at 17.
Okay.
And I had taken a bus into New York from New Jersey. I was going for fencing lessons, kind of like, not like Holden Caulfield, because Holden Caulfield was the manager of the fencing team, but I would take a bus into New York City, and at night I would go take fencing lessons at night when I was like a junior and senior in high school from the coach of the NYU team. He would give private lessons at night in this beautiful gym in the Village. And then afterwards, I would stop in the bars on Bleecker Street in the early 80s. They didn't check for IDs, and I'd get drunk, wipe out my fencing lesson probably, then get back on the subway, then back in a bus out to New Jersey, where either my mother would pick me up at like 11 o'clock at night at the bus station, or when I had a driver's license, I probably left my car there. And anyway, one time on the bus, there was a guy with like a rucksack. This would have been 81 or 82, probably 1982. And was fascinated by hitchhikers. My youth caught the tail end of hippies. Mm-hmm. So we went on a family trip, let's say to Pennsylvania or somewhere, you'd see people on the side of the road hitchhiking. Now, my father never picked them up, but I was always fascinated by them. And then over time, there was less and less hitchhikers. Less and less thing. Maybe it became more dangerous, that whole way of life, whatever. I did a little hitchhiking myself in Europe and, a little bit in the States, not too successfully. I once hitchhiked from northern France to Paris, though. It took me about 8 hours. It was pretty fun. Nice. Held up a sign. Some old lady took me and my friend like 3 miles. We got off the boat in France and Calais or wherever that was, and we didn't have much money, so we're going to hitchhike to Paris, or a friend was going to put us up, and we got a little cardboard sign, wrote Paris. We're on the side of the road, 2 hours. We're starting to get delirious. We have to go to the bathroom, and then we noticed behind the sign someone had written in magic marker like 2 English names, Bill and Trudy waited here 8 hours for a lift to Paris. We're like, no, 8 hours, it'll be nighttime, Yeah. And there's no cell phones to tell our friends, how nutty, why we didn't just take a train from Calais to Paris. So anyway, and we have our bags, so we walk a mile up the road as if that's going to make a difference. And sure enough, some old lady picks us up in a tiny car. She takes us 3 miles down the road, not much further. So we were about 3 hours waiting for a lift. And then finally this truck driver came, took us up, amazing, 3-hour drive, whatever it was, to Paris, 4 hour, I don't know how many. And, it was the coolest thing to arrive by truck into Paris, and we made it. And then I must have hitchhiked around the south of France a little bit back then, or that's how we'd get to the beach. We were taking a French course in this town called Montpellier.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and anyway, we'd hitchhike to the beach or take the bus. Anyway, gosh, I don't even remember the question.
I know, I just love this, because this is what this whole podcast is thrived on. Is I don't know, you have to have such,
Wait, it was something about, what was the question?
Oh, well, I asked you about favorite writers and books and stuff, and we just started talking about hitchhiking.
About Kerouac. Okay. Kerouac. So I'm on this bus coming back from New York, and I see a guy with what looked like the hippies. He looked like a hippie, and he had a rucksack like the hippies. And usually it was like a green military bag that they would carry on their shoulders. There weren't that many backpacks yet, and they weren't as ubiquitous as they became. So he had this green rucksack that had probably the single strap. And he was on a bus, but I said, hey, man, do you hitchhike? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, how do you do it? I was so fascinated, because I wanted to run away from home, and I wanted, and he's like, he didn't really want to talk to me. He's like, if you want to know anything about it, go find this book, On the Road, by Jack Kerouac. I was like, Kerouac? I'm like, what? Anyway, I went to a small bookstore in Wayne, New Jersey, and found this book by Jack Kerouac. And I didn't quite know the spelling of the name, but maybe I found it somehow. And I probably still have the edition somewhere. And it was showed this sunbeam, a big sun on the cover. It said On the Road. And then it said, the quote was, the book that turned on a generation. I'm like, what have I found here? And I read the thing, and just the whole thing became so romantic to me. And it was partly why I ended up living on the Bowery when I was 22, because of bums, because he wrote a lot about, hanging out with bums on the railroad, and, and these kind of bodhisattva bums, these kind of enlightened, because also a lot of Buddhism, there's something called, I think, bhiksus. A lot of the concept is to be homeless and to have nothing.
Yes.
And to just wander and receive alms and meditate and perhaps be of service, but it's like a way of life where you just, again, no attachments. But they can be very respected, the bhiksus. And so Kerouac had a fascination with the hobos. And so that was partly why I was very excited to live down the Bowery and hanging out with these old-fashioned hobos in the 86. and these homeless men. And anyway, so Kerouac.
Yeah.
That's why I hitchhiked, and that's how I came to find out about him, was through a hitchhiker in a bus. Because the guy was probably taking a bus somewhere and then get to a better spot where he could hitchhike.
You were basically asking him, what's your ideology? And he just basically told you his Bible or whatever. And that's the Hobo Bible, basically. We all at one point read that. I mean, that's what the podcast is about. It's about people living in a way where material consumption and stuff like that is kind of out of the picture. And so you get deeper connections, and that it changed my life. And that's why I stand behind it as something where I tell people I'm a homeless romantic and stuff. And some people turn their nose up, and other people, can maybe hopefully find value in real life experience. I know people better than I think they know themselves at this point. I mean,
obviously, there's a lot of tragedy without homes, so it's very painful. Like, I mean, I write about homelessness a bit in the new book.
Yeah. I think you nailed it pretty well, because the kind of characters that were underneath the bridge, I don't know, spoilers or anything, but there's a realness to everything that happens. You can just imagine people that just on a more primitive level, who need to survive, and there's drugs and money and comforts like sleeping bags and tents and stuff like this, and fires that are.
Yeah, I've had two friends who, became homeless, and it's just wild how they survive, and they really do. It's very Tennessee Williams, rely on the kindness of strangers. They also usually form a buddy, because like they, stuff gets stolen all the time, what little they have, in tents and sleeping bags, and then dealing with the elements, and then, having to panhandle for food. And,
yeah.
Then there's a lot of organizations, though, that do provide food and clothing and shelter. And this is another horrible issue going on in America, where there's so much wealth.
Yeah.
And,
I'll just remind people back home in America, I live in Germany, I live in Europe. We don't have homeless people in here because the government considers it a public health issue and takes money from taxes to make sure that people who are maybe not able to care for themselves, stuff like that they don't go slip through the cracks. The mentally ill have a place to go. It's not perfect by any means, and it's still the capitalistic Western world, but there's no homeless people. Like there are a few, but if you need help, they will pay for you to get off the street and be in a place. And that's real human fucking dignity. That's that's priceless. And I as being 10 years on the road in America, I hung out with all the bums under all the overpasses of all fucking 50 states almost, not Hawaii and Alaska, but I've seen it all. And there are some people who are providing real value in the form of music and jokes, and just these are human beings that shouldn't be just shit on, and they are. So I digress. We've done an hour and 13 minutes. I want to encourage everybody out there to pick up this book right here. It is incredible when it comes out. Just check your local place where you get your books and get it, because it's going to be great. Read it in the tub, read it on the bus, read it as the world goes down in flames. I don't care, but pick up the book, and we'll have Mr. Jonathan Ames back one day. We'll wave goodbye to everybody.
Well, I'll do this sound as a kind of closing.
Oh, right. Yeah, go ahead.
It's called the Harry Call. And then we can do, I don't mean to, tell you how to end your show. I'm sorry. But
what
anyway,
show?
I just thought it silly. You would appreciate it. I don't know how well I'm going to do because I don't have water, but this is a sound, it's a shtick I've done for years, but this is a sound my friends and I would make on the playground when being attacked by more normal children. And it's known as the Harry Call. And going hairy. Because in the 70s, when you went hairy, it meant you were crazy because you were a hippie. Some people think it's the herring call because I was the herring wonder, but it's the hairy call because when it was invented in the early 70s on a playground by my friends and myself, going hairy meant you were going crazy because you were like a hippie, you had long hair. So here's a hairy call.
Okay.
And thank you, everyone out there who may have listened to our rambling discussion.
Yeah.
I need to go. Okay, that was a little better.
That's scary. I'm going to set that to be my new alarm clock in the morning when I wake up so I can get up on time. It was a pleasure having you. We're going to talk after this. I just want to say goodbye to all these people. Get these people out of here.
Well, do the wave thing.
Do the wave thing.
Yeah, I guess since we're going to talk after, but I'll say it to you publicly. Yeah, if I ever make it to Germany, I'd love to, meet you in person.
Hey, man, we got a great big juicy guest room with a sofa and everything is set up. I mean, I wish you could bring your dog. It's a little tricky, but no, it's not really worth it. Everybody, dude, anytime you come through, we'd love to just hang out and host you. We'll teach you all the German things.
Are you fluent in German?
Ich bin fast fertig mit meiner Sprachenbildung. Yeah. I'm almost done with my German speaking education. I understand most people, but I sound like an idiot when I talk to people. But with time, I'm actually planning to go back to school so I can make something of myself, fight this world with education and stuff. Something's got to give, I'm telling you that. But yeah. You come on out, we'll host you. We'd love to have you. Take a break, fly out next week. I'll hang out with you anytime. All right, we'll say goodbye to everybody out there, and then I want to give you my bye-bye.